Hey, David, how's it going?
Hey, good. Thanks. How you doing, man?
Good. We're it's not feeling like it weather-wise, but market-wise, it feels like spring out here. We're getting a little more activity. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, what I feel like we're seeing in our market right now is people are starting to think like, okay, my tax return will hopefully be coming soon. Like that could help with some costs. I think that people are starting to get out there and look. At least that's what I'm hearing in my market, and we're seeing it pan out on the listing side too. Like we just listed a flip house a few weeks ago, and I wasn't sure what this. Typically, like I'm asking the realtor, right? Like typically winter is slow, right? So
Yes.
we were wondering what would happen, but we still saw multiple offers over asking price. So I don't know if it's just kind of that starter house kind of price point where we were listing, but still kind of solid demand in our area. So curious what you're seeing in Cleveland and even that seasonality type of thing, what you're expecting.
Yeah, we definitely have a slower season in winter. We've been seeing lower inventory, which means that the inventory that is available, especially the houses that are good, are still flying off the shelves. I mean, I just got a house under contract for a client a couple weeks ago, and we were bidding against multiple offers and over asking price, and people talking about waiving inspections again. Like, so even though it feels like we're really cooled off and we're in this buyer's market, it's not like that everywhere and not like that in every situation.
Yeah, it sounds like different price points, different markets, and that seasonality can shift. That's where I think the nuance of the market can be a really big thing.
Yeah.
Even in my area, just being a few blocks in a different direction can put you in a different neighborhood, in a different school district. You can see big shifts like that. So I think whether you are looking to buy right now or whether you're looking to flip a house or pick a rental, there's just a lot of nuance there. And so I know I've found value in connecting with a realtor that can help me with that. And I know to the theme of the episode about realtors, I'm sure that you do too.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because I've been seeing a big uptick in the concierge service utilization too. In fact, just in the last week, I've had two new investors reach out to try to get connected with local agents in their area to help them get off on the right foot. In fact, one of them was a brand new investor, pharmacist that was ready to buy their first investment property, wanted an awesome local agent. And the other one was a pharmacist that actually has worked with other agents before in her area, but wanted us to reach out and kind of give her the concierge plug and get somebody connected with them that was on our team or on our network. And so that was really awesome to be able to do that. And again, speaks to why that concierge service exists, right? It's because if you want a fantastic agent in your area that knows what you're doing and works in the specialty that you're trying to follow, like that's the person you got to get. So that's exactly what that service is useful for. So I guess if I should plug this too while we're talking about it. If you are interested in the real estate concierge service, you can go to yfprealestate.com, get connected with me, and we can get you connected with a great local agent no matter what you're trying to do.
Perfect. I know that as much as we talk about how realtors can be super helpful, I know that you are a realtor. I work with a realtor for a lot of what we do. We routinely get those questions though about whether or not realtors should be involved in all real estate transactions, or maybe better put, like, when do you need a realtor
Mm.
and when do you not, and why? And I know before we get too deep into that question, I want to reference back to episode 22 because we talked a couple of years ago now about buying a property off market and kind of the mechanics of buying a property without a realtor. So if we all remember back to kind of mid late 2021, that was red hot fire market and buying off market was getting increasingly popular. So we were getting questions at that point of how do I do this on my own without a realtor? Because I'm finding sellers that say, I don't want to work with a realtor. So, maybe as we see market seasons shift, is that still the case? I think that's what we should unpack more today.
Yeah, so just like we do every couple episodes, we wanted to do a deep dive on a few rapid fire questions actually about working with agents like myself, working with realtors. I think especially because the question of why should I use a realtor can sometimes feel uncomfortable, especially if you're asking it directly to an agent. I encourage my clients to ask that, like, make me prove my worth, right? I think it's valuable, but I think there's some stuff to unpack there, so it's what we want to dive through today.
Yeah, and I know pharmacist personality type in general may not really love that asking uncomfortable questions, particularly to somebody's face. So I drew the short straw today. I get to ask you, Nate, the realtor, the uncomfortable questions, right? So with a lot of people listening in about whether someone should or shouldn't work with a realtor and why in different situations might that decision make sense or not make sense. So let's start with an easier one, particularly for those that may not have caught episode 22.
Mhm.
What's the difference between a property sold with a realtor versus a buy owner or off market sale? What do some of these terms mean?
Yeah, it's a pretty common question. Often you'll hear this called something like buying on market versus off market, right? On market being something listed on the MLS, the multiple listing service. And a lot of investors refer to that on market transaction as one where, again, it's the agent, it's listed, it's everybody has access to it. It's just something that everybody can find, right? It's all over the place. Whereas a more off market deal could be anything as severe or as unfindable as just a sign in the yard, right? You could have somebody that posts a sign in their front yard that says, "Hey, house for sale," to what is more common, which is something that's posted on Zillow, posted on Redfin, posted on Realtor.com, things like that. So typically, an off-market deal or a deal in which a realtor is not involved is going to be what we call a for sale by owner or a FSBO. And those are just listed by the seller. They're listed by the person that owns the property, and a realtor is not involved in the marketing or the sale of that property at all.
And then it sounds like one more, just to put all the terms on the table. We've also talked with wholesalers that may connect
Right.
buyers and sellers directly, or this may be as simple as you're having dinner with friends. You mentioned that you're looking for a rental property. Someone says, I've been looking to get rid of this rental property, and two people just decide to sell a house to each other that was never marketed to anyone. That would be
Right.
another example.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could even take it as far as, sending out letters to people who are not marketing their property at all and saying, "Hey, if you ever want to sell, I'm your guy. Give me a call." Right. So there are lots of other nuances to it, but basically, of properties that are knowingly available for sale, those off market ones are the ones that are not listed on the MLS, not having an agent involved, basically. And I guess, one point of clarity now that I'm saying it out loud, right? You could actually pay an agent to list your house on the MLS, but not have them market it. I'll see these all the time where a house shows up on the multiple listing service, but under the notes, it will say, this is a limited service agreement. The agent is not marketing this property and has been paid to list this property on the MLS only. Please contact Dale at this number, and you can call him and he's the seller, right? So that happens quite a bit too. So you can be on the MLS without a real estate agent, and just not have them marketing it.
Interesting. So it sounds like though, if you're trying to get the most exposure, the most eyes on your house, the most potential people interested, uh, you'd presumably want to do that with a realtor and through the MLS. So why would someone choose to sell off market?
Yeah. So I think, what you have to understand is that realtors are paid by the seller. So if the seller is looking at this like, I want to preserve as much cash in this deal as possible. And often this happens when they don't have a lot of equity in the home, but it could just be because they don't want to give up any more cash than they have to. And so they're trying to sell it themselves, right? That's very typical where you don't want to pay the commission that you're setting up the seller for, or you're setting up as the seller, excuse me. And so you just try to do it by yourself, right? The other option, or the other thing that I often see is that people had a bad experience with a realtor in the past. Maybe they didn't like how a realtor did business, they didn't like how something turned out. And so their thought is, well, look, I'm not paying for something that I don't even believe in, or had a good experience with, so I'm just going to do this myself. Or maybe they have some experience. Maybe they themselves have sold multiple homes in the past. They've been through it before, and they feel like, I can just handle this. I don't need an agent involved in the transaction. The money is whatever, but I can do this. I don't need an agent involved.
Yeah, I know. I talked with a seller several years ago who was a realtor in
Mm,
a prior career, 20 or 30 years before. And so, he just said, I know enough about this. I can do this. I don't need a realtor. And that was his opinion. More power to him. So, yeah, different people definitely have different values in that. But you mentioned the commission. So that's probably worth unpacking a little more. I guess, are commissions set everywhere? Is it the same price? What is that typical price? If it's a $500,000 house, what's that look like? So can you talk about the commission piece for a minute?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there, and this is something that I get all the time, and I think it's really important to understand how this all breaks down because it can help to drive your decisions. So the way it works is that if you are an agent and you're working with a seller, the seller is the one that you're negotiating with in terms of a contract. And what it'll typically be is if David, you're my seller and you're thinking about selling a home, I say, look, David, here's our listing agreement. Here's all the things that I'm going to do for you, right? Everything from marketing to the ads that I'm going to be buying for it, the open houses I'm going to be having, the photography I'm going to be using, like all the stuff that I'm going to be doing as an agent. This is what it is in the listing agreement so that we can try to sell your property for as much as possible. For that work, you're going to pay me a commission, and that's going to be a percentage of the home sale in most cases. There are exceptions, of course, right? You can do flat fee listings, you can do a bunch of different stuff, but typically it's a commission based structure. And it's as a kind of an average, you're looking at about 6% as the cost to list that property. Now, it varies dramatically in different markets. I'm seeing more and more listings right now at around 5%. But typically, if you look over the long period, it's been about 6%. What I'll often see is as you get to that more expensive range, 500, 600, $700,000, you're going to see the commission start to fall off as you get to higher dollar amounts. So what's typical in our market is that you'll pay 6% on the first $100,000 of that property, then 5% on the next 300,000, or maybe 4% on the next $300,000 of value, on down to 2% and so on. So that basically it reduces the commission as the property gets higher in value. Then what happens is that selling agent, basically that seller and that selling agent together, once they've decided on all that, they agree to split that commission with the buyer's agent. So whoever brings a ready and able and willing buyer is going to get half of that person's commission. So again, for easy math, if they decide 6% is the number, whoever brings a willing and able buyer and actually closes, that buyer's agent is going to make 3%. They're going to take half of it. So all of it is provided to the seller. It's all coming from them up front. And again, it only goes through once that house actually closes. The agent does not get paid a dime until that house actually closes and goes off market.
Yeah, that feels like then there's some inherent risk there for the realtor, right? Especially if you're talking marketing fees and professional photography and some of those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the nature of our business. We pay upfront to try to market the property really well and make sure that we're doing our job in terms of picking a price point. So one of the things I do, this is actually a good sidebar for a second. So one of the questions I often get is, well, if I list with you and I pay this commission, are you going to sell it for the most money? Like, are you going to do the best job? And the reality is, like, and I usually answer this, right? Like, no, right? Like me versus somebody else, we're not going to be able to like pizzazz the property for more money. I can help you in terms of picking the right photos, picking the right updates, maybe changing or repairing some things that are going to really make your property sell in the right light. But the market value of your property is the market value. I can use strategy to drive differences in that market value. For example, if I know the house is worth $200,000 based on comparable properties, but I decide let's list it at 190 so that we get a bidding war and we get it to sell for 205 or whatever. Like, those are strategies, but the market value is the market value. It's on the agent to maximize the market value. And that's what I think a good agent actually ends up bringing to the table, is not selling the house for as much as humanly possible, but maximizing the market value potential of a home.
Yeah, and I've definitely felt that personally. We had a project very recently where so my example is this basement, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had a basement where the previous owner had partially finished it, and we were trying to figure out, well, if we hire a contractor, we finish the basement, egress window, all those things, it's going to cost us X. I think it was like around $15,000 in this case was the estimate to just finish this room in this basement. And so, yeah, I felt like it was on the fence. Does that make sense or not? So I called my realtor, and the realtor said, nope, don't finish it. It might bring you $15,000 more in value, but it's a gamble. You may not get all of that back. It's certainly going to take you some time. And so that's just going to delay the project and eat into opportunity costs of doing other things. Probably not worth it. So in that case, I found value in the realtor helping us to not waste time and money with unnecessary upgrades. We were able to move that project along a lot faster. So I think that I would agree with you that there's value there, not just in like, how do I get the highest price? But
Mhm.
I think too, because you say that people ask this all the time of like, is a realtor worth that 6%? Like,
Right.
so what are the other kinds of value propositions that you see there?
Yeah, I love that example, by the way. That's great. I think a lot of it breaks down to, trying to figure out what you can bridge gaps for with a seller and the buyer and the process, right? So if you've never sold a home before and don't understand the processes that go into it, I'll give you an example from a house that I've got listed right now. In this city that we're listing in, there's a point of sale requirement from the city. The city makes sure that you do an inspection. You have to have an inspector come in. They'll make a list of all these things that might be wrong with the property that you have to get fixed before you can sell it, or you have the buyer assume those violations, and there's a whole process to that. So there's a lot that goes into the steps that are required so that you can make sure that the property is even ready for sale, right? You could go to the title company and they could say, absolutely not. You can't transfer this until you do A, B, and C. So just sometimes what we do is insert ourselves in the process to help bridge gaps wherever they are, right? So, yes, you know how to sell a property. Yes, you could probably whip out your iPhone and take some photos. But what we're trying to do is come in and say, look, professionally, this is how you can do this the best way possible. And I can make the process as smooth as it needs to be, right? And bridge all those gaps that you might be missing. So that's generally where I think we fit in. And so one of my jobs when I'm going out to a potential listing appointment is to talk to that seller and figure out where the gaps are so that I can help them fill them before they even realize that it is a gap.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense for the value then on both sides of that. Really trying to get the process to the finish line, because it's one thing to get the photos up there, have people come, make an offer, but then there's so many. We've talked on other episodes about appraisal contingencies and repair contingencies and all kinds of things that happen in the inspection process. So many ways that a transaction can fall apart. And so, yeah, if you're able to hold that together and find solutions to those hiccups that happen, that makes total sense.
Yeah, and
Um,
sometimes it's more about finding the problems before they're problems, like anticipation. So much of my job is sending a text or an email to say, "Hey, let's make sure we do this now, so that in a week it's not a problem, and then everybody's blowing up because it's become much bigger than it could be if we just tackle it right now."
Absolutely. And especially with, some sellers or some buyers can be on a really tight timeline. Like
Mhm.
they have given notice that they're moving out of their apartment. They need a place to move into. And so things have to happen on a timeline. That may or may not be the case in kind of the investing side, but you may be some more flexibility on when to start or sell a house. But particularly for owner occupants, that can be really critical.
For sure.
Uh, so I can see why a realtor would bring a lot of value to the seller then. And if the seller pays for the realtor, meaning that the realtor is essentially free to the buyer then is not reaching into their pocket and paying the realtor. It would seem like the buyer should always have a realtor. But I also see buyers go out there without realtors. So why would a buyer ever not want a realtor?
Yeah, so great question, and I think there's something we should highlight there for a second. That is that the agent is free for the buyer, right? And because I think that's usually true, but it's a pitfall that I just want to kind of highlight. So, yes, typically the fee is being paid by the seller, and it's going to the buyer's agent, right? They're splitting the commission like we
Mhm.
discussed before. But there are situations where if the seller is, let's say, listing the house as for sale by owner, and they don't want to pay a commission, for example, at all, then their buyer's agent might not have any commission coming to them, right? There might not be anything coming from the seller at all. They might not be willing to pay it. And so part of that negotiation is, well, then does it come from the buyer? Does it come from, like, how does that person get paid for representing you? So yes, 99% of the cases it's coming from the seller, but those one-offs where it's not, that's when you need to start looking into the contracts and making sure that you're understanding what's going on as a buyer. So one of the most common things I see is if you are taking an off-market listing or trying to buy an off-market listing, buyers can be nervous about having a agent because they don't want to have to pay that agent's commission, right? And I've seen contracts where the buyer's agent will actually write up the agreement where if I don't get paid by the seller, you owe me the full 3%. Right. And so that can feel like for a buyer, because I thought this was free. And now I'm coming up with down payment and your commission and everything. Like, it just feels like a lot. So that's one of the most common reasons I think I see that is where a buyer is nervous that they're going to have to pay a lot of money for that agent if they go off market. Beyond that, I think it's just lack of knowledge, not understanding that the buyer's agent is there to help you. And that again, in those 99 out of 100 cases, they're doing that and they're getting paid by the seller, and you don't have to pay a dime, right? You're getting taken care of without having to pay anything. So that's part of why we do this, right? Educating people about it and getting them access to great agents, because just knowing is part of the battle.
Yeah, and I think one of the other potential reasons that I've heard of not engaging a realtor on the buyer side is that, if you are concerned about those costs and you're thinking, well,
Mm.
I'm pretty good at negotiating myself, I want to go in there and be the one to negotiate because, the realtor, if they're incentivized to get it done, not necessarily get me the best deal. So, I've seen people do that too. So can you speak to kind of the negotiating side of things as well?
Yeah, I think the thought process is if there's only one agent involved, then I can negotiate better, right? They're gonna get a better deal. I actually had this once with a listing. I had this was a couple of years ago, and it was a pretty popular listing, hot market. This is right before the pandemic, and the buyers came through an open house, and they said, "Hey, we really like this house. We're not represented by an agent. If we write an offer and don't have an agent at all, can we take, X% off of the commission?" And I was like, okay, well, there's a lot to discuss there. But yeah, so like that was kind of their immediate thought was like, maybe I can save 1% on this commission and I'm going to be getting a great deal. What I think they're often missing though is that if you really have a good agent in your corner, they're going to help you evaluate the market price of that home and make sure that you're getting a better deal up front. I've seen people overpay just to save 1% on a commission when they could have just had a good representative and actually negotiated down the price to begin with. So I get it. I definitely see that a lot. And I get the mentality behind it. It feels like if I do it myself, it should be cheaper, but that's not always the case.
Okay, so we've definitely made this sound like a very positive thing to involve a realtor, right? And I think that there's probably people out there thinking, well, you're asking a realtor; they're going to tell you the positive thing. So, what are the downsides of involving a realtor? Is there any time where you would not want to have a realtor, or talk through that at all?
Yeah, I'm obviously biased, right? Like I totally I get that, right? Please take this all with a grain of salt. But I'll tell you, there are times where it absolutely makes sense to not engage a real estate agent. One of those situations, this actually came up, gosh, a couple of years ago with a concierge client, and it's just a good example of what I'm thinking of. So the client got on our jumpstart planning call. They were renting from a landlord and they really loved the home they were in. And so they reached out to the landlord and they just said, like, hey, any interest in us buying the place off of you? Like, we've been loving renting here, but we'd love to buy the place. Like, we just love this house. Can we stay? Can we buy it? And he's like, yeah, I'd be willing to sell it. And so their question to me basically became like, do we need an agent involved in this transaction? And it was a great question because and my immediate question back to them was, well, does the seller want an agent or just you want it? Like, where is this coming from? And they said, I don't know. We just feel like we need an agent. And in that case, I actually recommended just having a title company and a lawyer involved. You don't need a real estate agent in this case. You know both parties. You're living in the home. There's no surprise inspection. There's nothing to hide. I mean, like you've been there for years. You understand this pretty well. What you need help with at this point is simply contract terms and negotiation of the contract terms themselves. It's not a question of price necessarily. It's not a question of other buyers competing. Both parties knew each other. It was a pretty simple meeting. It was just figuring out the terms of the contract, and that's when a lawyer and a title company could be really effective. And you just simply don't need to pay an agent in that case. So I advise them like don't use our service for this. Don't get an agent. Get a great title company and get a great lawyer, and that way you can make sure that everything's off on the right foot. So that's the situation where you think both parties know each other really well. There's no marketing involved. And again, it's really just a question of getting the terms right on the contract. So that's one. The other, I think, and this might be, I don't know what the right word is, but this might be a lame answer, but a bad agent is probably worse than no agent at all, right? Because if you have no agent at all, you're going to be taking an extra set of look at everything, right? You're going to be reading all the contracts. You're going to be going over everything with a fine tooth comb. Whereas if you're just trusting your agent to get all that stuff right and you have a bad one, that's probably a lot worse, right? So that's kind of another situation where it might be best to just go it on your own and make sure you're doing it all, with your own eyes, double checking it.
No, that makes sense. And I think if we look back at kind of where we started in 2021, the market was wild and crazy, and there was this push to not involve realtors because
Hmm.
that's what sellers were looking to do, right? And so it sounds like there's reason why involving a realtor, why not involving a realtor could make sense in certain circumstances. And so now that we're in 2023, things have cooled a little bit. I'm wondering, how does that change your answer on any of this? So, particularly with increasing inventory on the MLS, does it make sense to look for on market properties rather than stress about kind of going off market?
Yeah, I've always been a proponent that there are deals to be found on market just about everywhere. And that's becoming more and more true, right? So I think if the idea of off market, the idea of like sending out letters and farming for leads and all this other stuff and dealing with wholesalers, like if that all feels overwhelming, there will always be on market and MLS based deals. What I would recommend that you do though is get a really good real estate agent to help you navigate those on market deals faster, right? We get pocket listings all the time, meaning listings that before they ever really go live, we know about them, we know what's upcoming. Especially if we are in the investor space, right? We're going to understand who's in the market, who might be selling soon. Is there a flipper that's working on a property or that's about to offload something or whatever, buying a portfolio? You can get access to more of that information with a good real estate agent, and you don't have to be doing all this work off market. And again, especially as the inventory has been shifting, it's becoming easier and easier in certain markets at least.
No, I agree. I think that this myth that the only deals are off market is truly a myth. I know
Yeah.
we found things last year on the MLS, expect to find more this year on the MLS. And so it may take patience to find that and to sort through those things. And I like your point about being proactive, having good conversation in that. But off market properties can take patience too if you're sending postcards and letters and trying to pass out business cards and talk with anyone and everyone you can.
Yep.
So next question then, what unique risks might exist in this current market where we're seeing some market shift if you're trying to work either off market without a realtor, just direct to seller, or with a realtor?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm seeing, and it'll be interesting to see where this pans out in the next couple of months. But more and more properties going up where there are like delinquent payments or back taxes, things that would be pretty easy to find for a good title company or a good real estate agent that you could miss off market, right? So what I worry about is, I actually was just talking to an investor friend of mine the other day who got a text from a Facebook ad, or like a Facebook, post that was like, "Hey, I want to sell this property off market," blah 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 blah, and the pictures this guy was sending and everything looked great. But I jumped on the MLS and I could immediately see like, oh, it has an 8-page long list of point of sale violations and all this stuff. So like he could have wasted a ton of time going down this road without ever knowing that those were in place until all of a sudden title found them in 10 weeks from now or 10 days from now, or 2 weeks from now, and then all of a sudden it's a problem and he's wasted a bunch of time and some money on inspections and things like that. So that's where I think I could see the risk. Yeah, an agent's good at finding information, right, and finding it quickly, and so that's kind of an advantage that we provide, especially when you're dealing with something that it's out there. It's just a matter of finding it.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. I think another one that I've heard from just off-market negotiation lately is sellers that still think it's July 2022 and like, well, my neighbor sold this house 6 months ago at this huge price, and they still think that the market is red hot because that's what happened for their neighbor,
Yep.
and they're not necessarily correcting to where things are now. I know a lot of investors, if you are predicting that the market is going to soften further, maybe you're offering even lower, and so there can be a really big disconnect there too when trying to talk with folks off market. So one last question then, is it
Yeah.
a trap to buy a property off market without a realtor? Like should you be expecting that there's some kind of shady shenanigans with that seller if they're saying no realtors involved?
Yeah, I think that it can feel that way, right? Where you see the post and it'll be this great looking house and all this information and it says absolutely no realtors, right? Like
Yep, yep.
yeah, I've definitely seen those. The short answer to your question is not necessarily, right. It's not always a trap. It's not always bad. Just for the reasons we mentioned before, that seller just might not want an agent involved in their side. They just don't want to pay commissions. And whatever that reason, that can be okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should just write that property off, right? There are things you can do to protect yourself. Again, good lawyer, good title company. Or if it really comes down to it and you feel like I really want to have an agent in my corner, one of the things you can ask that seller is, hey, look, can I bring in my own agent? I will pay them. Don't worry about the commission. I need somebody that can help me navigate this process. And they might be okay with that. In fact, I've talked to many FSBO listings where they don't want to pay a seller commission, but they are more than happy to pay 2.5% to a buyer's agent to help them navigate the whole process. The only downside to the agent in that case is that it's usually twice as much work for a piece of the commission, but it can be helpful to your buyers and it can be helpful to the seller in that case.
Yeah, I know one of the very first properties that we bought off market, we did that. We asked a realtor, and my conversation with the seller was, I think that having a realtor involved that knows the process inside and out can help both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, my offer will be X% higher. We'll back out X% then for the agent, and so you're still going to get what you're looking for.
Yep.
But then, we both got help in this process. And I think you're right. There's still a lot of safety that can be inserted there. Talk to me for a minute though about like home inspection and appraisal contingencies. You've talked about those safety valves in prior shows. Are those still a thing off market?
Yeah, that's the only thing you want to. If there's a red flag at all, right? It's not the line about no realtors. It's anything where they want the deal to be cash only, no inspections. Like those are the ones that immediately are huge red flags for me, right? Not that those are all bad. We've bought properties all cash with
Mhm.
just a pass fail inspection, right? That's not bad. When they're leading with that, though, like okay, immediately the question becomes, well, what are you hiding? The other thing is when they have a deadline to close. And usually when that deadline is like the end of the month, that's usually a pretty
Mhm.
good sign that there's something else going on. It could be that they owe a lot of back taxes or that the house is about to be foreclosed upon. These are things that title would probably find. But if all of a sudden you find yourself in this situation where they want to close quickly. They already have a title agent who's already been working on it. Now all of a sudden you just get wrapped up in this thing and a lot of big stuff could be missed. So those are what I get worried about. Um, you absolutely should be able to still have those safety valves we've been talking about. A regular inspection, a regular contractor walkthrough, financing contingencies. Like those are all normal things on market or off. It does not have to be an all cash, like showing up with a duffel bag full of money kind of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah. If someone wants to work outside of a title company and, no lawyers, no nothing, like, yeah,
Bad.
that definitely sounds concerning. And sometimes even just knowing that why behind what's going on and behind those requests can be helpful. Like
Mhm.
I worked with a seller one time who was just very transparent. Like, yeah, I'm about to get foreclosed on.
Mm.
I'm between a rock and a hard place, and I would like to sell and walk away with something rather than have a foreclosure on my record and walk away with nothing. And so, sometimes there can be even urgency. And I'm sure you see this on the MLS also, where there can be,
Yeah.
motivated seller and things like
Yep.
that, where there can be urgency. And it doesn't have to necessarily be scary if you have those safety valves in place. You've got the title company, you've got that. But yeah, showing up, writing a check, having someone just sign over a deed to you, that starts to make me real nervous.
Yeah. I had one where, again, an investor friend of mine said the guy wanted to meet down at the county courthouse to sign over the title. And he was like, can you come like this weekend or like this afternoon or something? It was like, dude, don't do that deal. That's not going to be good. So yeah, definitely.
Yep, yep. No, we had one of those as well. Someone wanted to close the next day, cash, meet at the courthouse. Like, no, if it's those kind of things, that feels a little more scary. And so again, like it can be a great opportunity to bring a realtor or a more experienced investor to this discussion and say like, what's going on here? Because some of these do feel really sketchy, like it could be a trap. Some could be legitimate.
Yeah, and something else to keep in mind too is that if you have some experience in this, right? First time investors, this all sounds like terrifying. But if you've got experience, if you know your market and you've been in these types of situations before, it can be a little bit easier, right? It can be simpler to navigate. you might be able to do one of those deals as long as you know what you're getting yourself into. I just don't recommend any of this stuff for a first time investor or a first time buyer. It's just a lot to navigate without an agent or somebody in your corner.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're just sitting in a much better place in 2023 of, there were people that were tempted to force something like that when there was nothing on the market, but I think we're at a time in the market where if those kind of things make you uncomfortable, and I'm hoping that there are people listening to this that are just really uncomfortable by some of those stories, and so in that, you don't have to force it. You don't have to put yourself in that awkward position. You can get a realtor. That realtor can have your back and make sure that you are in a safer situation for a transaction in 2023.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about not forcing it. I was just reminded of a story. I had a client that was buying an out-of-state investor that was trying to buy here locally here in Cleveland. And it was actually an on-market deal. We were dealing with a bank, though. It was a real estate-owned property or basically a foreclosure. And one of the things that they ran into was that the inspection found that the roof had issues. And again, long story short, but basically they were going to get to the point where they were either going to have to buy the property as is or try to repair this house while it was still real estate owned and not being taken care of. And it would have been a pretty big nightmare, but about $10,000 roof repair when they didn't even own the property. And so I was able to jump in and say, look, guys, I actually think this is not worth pursuing, right? Like we don't need to do this particular deal. There's just so much risk built into this. You're repairing somebody else's home at this point that they're not taking care of, that we don't have eyes on. You're not even in the state. Like there's just a lot going into this that even though some of the numbers make sense and some of the things look good on paper, it's quickly getting to the point where it no longer makes sense. And so sometimes that real estate agent is there just to give you that quick reset too, right? It's not about like getting you to the finish line. It's about making sure the finish line still makes sense to actually go after. So there are a lot of times when bringing that agent can be helpful in terms of the negotiations, in terms of working with that seller and helping them navigate the process, or just walking you away from something that doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of a realtor like truly having your back when they say like, no, because it is so easy to get emotionally attached to a house when you walk it. As a personal residence, you're like, I could picture myself in this living room, in this kitchen with this view, whatever it would be, right? Or there's the same kind of thing on the investor side. Like you see the spreadsheet, you see the house, you see how well it's built. You're like, this could be a great house.
Right.
But yeah, if there's things like that kind of pop up throughout the process, you have a reality check there to say like, maybe this isn't a smart investment for you.
Yeah, I think it's tough when you've already gotten the numbers in the spreadsheet to work. You just want to keep jamming the numbers into the spreadsheet until but sometimes they just stop working, and you have to be able to take a step back and reevaluate that. So definitely an example of when some outside source can be helpful.
Yeah. So I think we've talked through a lot of the reasons why there can be circumstances when not involving a realtor can make sense. A lot of those situations have to do with when you have some experience under your belt and you've been through this. A lot of situations where having a realtor that you work with can make a lot of sense for that second set of eyes, the safety, the fiduciary interest, all of that coming into play. Particularly thankful now in 2023 that things are a little less competitive and you're not being forced into one bucket or another. So with that, Nate, the realtor, any final thoughts before we wrap up the episode?
No, just thanks for putting me in the hot seat. It's always good to answer these questions. And again, like I know there's some bias built into this, right? Like I think the real estate agent side is great because I am one, but do evaluate it on the surface, right? Don't just ask like your uncle and his bad experience with a real estate agent one time, have it color your judgment. Like evaluate the need for an agent when it makes sense. And if you need help, again, that's what we're here for, right? We have the real estate concierge service we mentioned earlier. If you go to www.yfprealestate.com, you can click on the link there, get connected with me. We'll help you get connected with a great local agent for free. That way you can get off on the right foot. So no excuse to not have an awesome real estate agent in your corner. Hopefully this gives you some insight into what we do and why you might want to check that out. So hopefully that's helpful.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. If you like what you heard on today's show, please leave us a review and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. If you have a question, know someone that would make a good guest, or want to connect with Nate or David, head on over to yfprealestate.com and join the growing YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group. As we conclude this week's episode of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast, an important reminder that the content in this podcast is provided to you for your informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on this podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist, unless otherwise noted, and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you for your support of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. Have a great rest of your week.